How's it going, guys? World War II soldier, traveling beam. We're going to talk to you what you need to know and what to buy as far as World War II airborne reenacting. Alright guys, so we're going to start off things with head to toe. There's different types of head equipment you can have. There's garrison caps, helmets, or just standard wool hats just to kind of wear around camp. As far as airborne goes, there's really only two styles of helmets that were worn. Early war was the M2 helmet, and then there's the M1C helmet. Caleb, you want to tell us what the M2 and the M1C differences from the M1?
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, things we should point out probably is that a lot of these had traditional liners. Whether they were very similar or not, they're very traditional to the infantry helmets. However, a lot of these guys would have had netting or scrim, which is anything from leaves to bushes to anything that could get to blend in with the environment. With the if I'm not mistaken, the M1 or the M2, whichever one that I have, it's got the D rings on it.
That's
actually,
the M2. Yep.
Okay, then there we go. I'm glad he remembers. I'm a little foggy, folks. You have to forgive me. Fortunately, it's easy enough to have it built into where you can take it off, and the shell, which is your liner, is easy enough to replace with a brand new one, but still has the chin strap and capabilities of the netting.
So really the differences between an M1C and an M2 helmet are the D bells or D rings. You got different bells. As far as all three of these styles helmets go, you have the M1 helmet. They come in two bells, swivel and fixed. For paratroopers exclusively, they had the D rings. And one thing what really confused me when I got into reenacting were the helmets, because a helmet has two parts. You have the liner, like Caleb said. You have the liner and the shell, or the pot is what most people call them. It's just a steel pot, and then most of those you find in your antique stores for like 20, 30, 40 bucks. That most of the time they're originals, probably from Korea or even Vietnam, but you could still use it. Now, if you're gonna find one in your antique store and you're gonna find it, it's gonna be most likely a swivel or a fixed bell. It's okay. You can still use that helmet for paratrooper, but if you put the liner, a paratrooper liner in it, it's going to be an M1C helmet, not an M2. Garrison caps. You want to kick that off?
So a garrison cap, for you folks that don't really know, is a real thin line hat that covers the top of the head. And a lot of guys were real cocky back in the day and would pop it to the side, or they just got to the unit and thought they were hot. And it was just one of those things that signified, hey, I'm part of the boys, part of the gang. But a lot of these folks don't realize, especially for that is the piping. If a lot of folks don't realize that there is different trim around them. Your standard infantry cap would have almost like a royal blue. Cavalry would have been yellow. Red would have been artillery. Black would have been tank destroyers. And if I'm not mistaken, an orangish would have been armor.
Burgundy, kind of like a purple, kind of violet would be medical.
Yes. But the thing of it is a lot of folks don't realize that. I think a big flaw a lot of people see in reenacting today is not necessarily with the original photos, but a lot of folks will have, for us being paratroopers, a lot of times we have the blue parachute on the left side of the cover. However, late war it would have been switched. It would have been a dark blue with a red ring and a glider in front of it, especially toward Market Garden as we push closer to Germany, out of Belgium, Holland area, and into the Bolt. A lot of folks also, you'll see people get confused and put them on the right side of the cover. Is that correct? Yes. But if you're enlisted, that's incorrect because that's only designated for officers. Mind you, this is only airborne covers. A lot of the ones that are non-airborne wouldn't have had any patches at all. Like I said, you just would have worn it as is. And once you reach the rank of 01, being second lieutenant, you would have added your bars and so forth and so on as you rose the ranks.
Going off of what he just said, you're going to find a lot of the original stuff. Paratrooper, mind you, just paratrooper. There's one side. Standard U.S. Army. And that is small. Small.
On the PA.
I have a size 7 3/8 head.
I wear 7 1/4. That's
I've-
the most common size.
I've seen, yeah, like, he has it made for this. Skinnier, bigger people like me, it has a harder time. But as far as originals go, now I'll put some sources in the description that still manufacture reproductions. They're not original, but they pass with flying colors.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go ahead and name one At the Front. Atthefront.com. They're here in the U.S.
Out of Kentucky, actually. Great stuff.
Yep. They have they'll pipe it for you. You can get it without piping, and you can buy the piping separate. If you sew and you know how to do piping, go for it.
He mentioned At the Front. I think another great company out of the UK. Like I said, you might have to pay it in pounds. Don't worry about it. It's not that much difference. I got mine from Epic Militaria. They came to one of the largest shows in Europe, which is the War and Peace Revival. Fantastic event, ladies and gentlemen. If you're in Europe or you're in the U.S. or anywhere else around the world, and it's usually the last whole week of July, from like the 20th, 21st, all the way to the end of the month or something like that. Hundreds and hundreds of we call them sutlers or traders or stalls, if you will. And they're always there. They've got a super great crew. Their website's very navigatable, I guess. It's very friendly. Prices are great as well. And like I said, I picked mine up with the blue piping and bought the little blue parachute. Had one of our nurses sew it on, and easy day. Like I said, I only spent about 15, 20 pounds, and it was very, very well quality.
Next, you got what I like to call your leisure hats. They're not really needed to do an impression, but they were used during World War II. One of which I'm wearing right now. This is commonly referred to as the Jeep cap. It's really just like a toboggan, with like a little cardboard inserted build. Definitely great for winter events. You might be more familiar with the other kind of leisure caps that would be found in World War II reenacting.
I'm sorry, I was mesmerized by the 50 caliber can on the floor. And yes, that's right, folks, I actually am. A lot of traditional folks don't realize this, but if you have a great Marine Corps impression, ladies and gentlemen, granted it's hard to do a Pacific impression around here. There's not really any Joneses, I'm sorry. However, a very traditional hat that a lot of the Marines seem to fancy was, and nurses as well, is the Daisy May. If I can put a little notion out there, if a lot of you folks that are more common to the modern day military, if you're familiar with the boonie hat, which started in early to mid Vietnam and is still in use today, it was very similar to that. Had a very wide brim to protect you from the sun, but also quite fashionable. However, it was a very good cap to use. Like I said, you would have seen medical personnel wearing it. It was more common, I would say, in the Pacific. And the only reason that is, think about it. You're in Europe, it's the middle of June, it might be 75 and sunny. Now, if you're in the Pacific in June, and you were on the island of what? We'll say Guadalcanal, and it's 105 and sticky, I'd like something to protect my noggin, wouldn't you? So, a lot of Marines and medical personnel seem to really enjoy these hats. Whether you wore them down or popped them up just to be fancy, they were a darn good hat to wear. Traditional hat of them all, which is the HBT hat. Most common one would have been wore with HBT trousers, or the later wore, say, the M43s, and you could have gotten away with them early. A lot of them would have been worn in, say, boot camp or something like that. The Marines ended up changing the style just a hair, giving it almost its 8-point essential cover, which eventually became very, very big in Vietnam, and is what the United States Marine Corps and U.S. Navy wears to this very day.
Next, we're going to talk about jackets. Now, as far as the airborne goes, we're not going to get into standard infantry. That's a video for another time. But right now, we're just doing airborne. So, the most common uniform in all the reenacting realm of World War II is the M42 unreinforced. That is your early war airborne impression. They wore them all through the war. Husky, Normandy, Market Garden. They wore them all through. So if you want to get your first set of uniforms, I would do M42 unreinforced. Give you a little backstory. We deployed our airborne troops in there, and pockets were getting blown out. Their elbows were getting destroyed. Same with their knees, and we learned that lesson early on in the war, and so those were with the unreinforced now. So then we started reinforcing the uniforms with thicker canvas in the elbows, knees, as well as the pocket trim. So that's the difference between reinforced and unreinforced. Now, Caleb, would you tell us era and stuff about M43s?
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, once we finally initiated Operation Market Garden, in which a lot of countries were about to jump into Arnhem, in which 3 different bridges had to be taken, in which the 82nd had to take the Nijmegen Bridge. 3 bridges had to be taken, in which the Allied offensive was pushing deep into the heart of Germany. But we were still in Holland. German armor was being forced up through Wegel, in which we had to take Eindhoven. However, at this time, a lot of people don't realize that the environment no longer matched the light tan uniform consistency of the pants and the jacket, which were M42s. So what did we do? We switched to M43s. Now, these were also reinforced. However, we could stick with the consistency of being reinforced because learning the lessons of the past and blowing people's crotches out, people's knees, elbows, everything they could think of, we wanted to stick with it. But we needed a darker camouflage. A lot of guys don't also realize that the American Airborne had patches, and not everyone had patches. There's a lot of photos and video you can see of the 82nd that had the U.S. flag, whereas the 101st didn't. It was just a thing, but you have to remember once you got into Holland, that is, we had to let the Dutch and the Dutch resistance know that we were friendlies falling from the sky.
So those are your jump jackets. Now moving on to something a little different, a little out there, but a lot of people wore them within airborne units. My particular unit, I reenact medical. So I'm a combat medic, so with the 82nd Airborne, but there was an attached unit to it, which would be the 307th MED. They wore, which they were mostly females, okay, so nurses, they wore HBTs.
Well, folks, the HBTs were about as common as you could get, whether they're the coveralls or the blouse with the pants. I mean, they were basically as OD as you could get, and they were quality products made in the U.S. However, when you go to buy reenacting supplies, like I said, you can find HBTs just about anywhere, whether the coveralls or the jacket or the pants. But you gotta remember, don't overpay for them, folks. Honestly, like I said, if you can go to some of the quality places like him and I mentioned, whether it's At the Front, Epic Military,
Sportsman's Guide,
Soldier of Fortune, there's so many places out there that have quality products where you're not gonna get screwed price-wise, and you're going to get a quality product. However, if you don't want to just roll it out the stall, I would recommend, messing them up just a little bit so it shows some quality.
Take a look at some pants, some trousers. So we're going to start off with the M42 jump trousers. The M42s had a coin, kind of a tan color to them. They came in reinforced as well as unreinforced. Early war, they were unreinforced. Your jump trousers would be worn with their own unique suspenders on them. The reason being, these guys jumped in there knowing that they would not have any form of reinforcements days to come. So they had to have ammunition, medical supplies, rations. They were packed down, including their pants pockets. So they needed something better than just a standard belt to hold their pants up. So they resorted to suspenders. Once again, everything we're talking about is up to you. If you're doing an early war impression, you're going to stick with the M42s, everything. If you're going to do a late war impression, you could do M42s as well. Or you could do an M43 impression. It all depends on what you want to do. So moving on down to the body, we have our feet. Now, feet need to be protected. Feet keep you moving. So with that, airborne exclusive, you had the Corcoran jump boots. They were made out of this light brown leather.
They're standard jump boots in which, like I said, quality made Corcorans. That's another thing, kind of deviating from historical. If we get into the reenacting aspect, which Like I said, you can buy corkers just about anywhere, but they have to be brand name corkers, because I've seen a lot of guys out here say, "Oh, it's a pair of paratrooper jump boots," and they buy it, and if it doesn't say Corcoran on the tag inside the boot, you got ripped off. However, I wouldn't go out here and pay $250, $300. Are they quality? Yes. Are they worth that? No. I bought mine off of U.S. Patriot Tactical. Check those out, guys. If you love boots, they've got anything from modern day combat boots to hiking boots, you name it, they got it. And I got them very well made pair of Corcorans for $150. I will say though, I wear an 8.5 normally. The downside is with them being all leather and kind of an older school boot, I had to buy a 7.5 because over time that leather, when you polish it, whether it's wet, cold, whatever's on it doesn't dry rot, it's going to expand. So be careful with your sizes, guys, but I highly recommend that site. They're a little taller than traditional boots nowadays. Guys are wearing 8-inch boots. These are 10 inches, so they come a little bit further up the calf. I will recommend putting in insoles if you get a chance, because the worst thing to do is get out there and you just run around and you get a little water in them, and it's just horrible because your feet will start rotting and all of a sudden you've got a cramp. It's miserable. So take care of them and take care of your feet, guys, honestly.
Socks. You want to, it depends how well you want to stay in the character, but wool socks.
Yeah,
green wool socks is
OD
really
green,
what we would wear.
Cushion sole.
Yeah, and you want to keep them dry if you're getting into reenacting, or if you're watching this and you've been reenacting for years, you will know not every event is dry. Yeah, no.
And powder goes a long way, I promise.
Yeah, and that's another thing you want to invest in to keep the upkeep going with your Corcorans. Polish. You want to keep those things nice and shiny. Mm-hmm. Especially if you pay that $250, like you're saying. You're gonna want to keep them nice and clean. You want to keep them looking nice. Moving on to another boot you can wear. Their coin name is the double buckles.
Double buckle, guys. They're especially late war. I can vouch for this. My great grandfather wore them. So basically, you would have taken the standard rough out or M1 service shoe, which is what a lot of Navy guys would have wore, or deck shoe, if you will. And all it had was a upper buckle, which he'll provide pictures with, and it just gave the ankle more support, because you gotta remember these rough out Brogan looking style shoes, they're only about like that. They were basically the alternative to original guys who were in the infantry wearing how would I put this? What's a good way to put this? Oh, I'd say leggings, if you will, or gaiters as some people call them. Yeah. It's just, people got tired of them, they got destroyed, they got lost. It was very unprofessional for the Army, at least, to have their pants rolled down like that. In the Pacific, you would have worn, like I said, tried to keep the rough outs and the leggings, although by late war, especially if you're doing a Marine impression, a lot of these guys would have just ditched the leggings by late war and just cuffed the pants, because it's just, there's no sense in continuing to do something if they're already destroyed. So try to take care of them.
As far as upkeep goes on double buckles, at least from my experience of wearing them, they're not made out of the same kind of smooth leather material as far as your Corcorans would be. Like he said, I just brushed them. They're made to be rough. They're a really rough boot. I wouldn't even polish them, to be honest. I'd get all the mud, dirt, gunk, whatever you got from the event, and store them. All leather should be treated with some form of, I use saddle soap. It keeps it moist, it keeps it from not dry rotting. These guys are jumping out of an airplane. These guys are jumping out of an airplane, and they have to keep everything as tight as their person as possible. The first set of gear we're going to talk to you about is your M36 combat suspenders.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
To caveat off of what he said, the M36s were your traditional rigging. Like I said, it would have been almost a Y strap, or another 20 years from now, and closer to Korea and Vietnam, they would have done a double strap. However, we would have reverted back to the Y strap later on in years to come. But they're very comfortable. A lot of guys would put like a shoulder type pad in them. I have them. I don't have them installed. You would have attached the M36 musette bag to that, which you would have carried a little bit of everything. People carried blankets, ponchos, extra ammunition, food, supplies, medical, anything you could get in that bad boy.
Belts, you would have your pistol belt, or a cartridge belt. Cartridge belt was made for your M1 Garand or your M1 Carbine. If you're going to do All-American, they would have worn a pistol belt. Everybody would have had some form of medical kit. It's a little Carlisle bandage kit that would be onto the bottom portion of your belt.
It's on the front.
They would have a canteen. They would have, now this is cartridge belt. They would have your ammunitions within the belt itself.
A lot of guys would have carried your scabbard and bayonet.
There you go.
You could have even had a entrenching tool. A lot of guys, infantry kits, you would have had it on the, not necessarily a musette bag, but like a haversack. And the Marine impressions are the same way. There's 3 different versions of the Marine sets of the suspenders with the belt and all their stuff. You would have had, you know, type 1, 2, and 3. Is, you know, as we progressed throughout the Pacific, it started to get darker, it seemed, or whatever. It looked the same, but the only thing I could really tell was the canteen cover went from single, double, and then overlap, which I love the overlap myself. That's the type 3, which was about 44 to 45 when we were in Okinawa and stuff like that. The only thing airborne guys would have kind of, you would have carried them, but it was a tough one. If you can get your hands on a traditional E-tool, do it. A lot of the entrenchment shovels that you would have seen on the haversack that the Marines carried, or on the way the infantry would have carried it, a lot of the guys, the T-handles, if I'm not mistaken, is in M1910. A lot of the paratrooper guys would have taken it and cut it in half and just kind of welded it back together. I mean, think about it. You're exiting an aircraft, and you don't want all that extra weight on you. I mean, if you can sacrifice 2 or 3 pounds worth of metal off a shovel, then by all means do it.
As far as pistol belt goes, now, pistol belts don't just refer to pistol. It really doesn't. 82nd Airborne used pistol belts as well as what would be called as rigger pouches. Rigger pouches are literally just a pouch, just like a fabric canvasy-like pouch. Usually you'd throw ammunition in it. Uniquely, if you do your research and you see pictures, they are tied off with parachute cording, which is very interesting. They pretty much, the All-American pretty much coined that.
You know, guys would have customized it depending on their position within the squad or the platoon. You know, 90% of guys that were designated riflemen, you will see your traditional cartridge belt being a pistol belt, but having a medical pouch, then having your first aid pouch, if you will, then also having your canteen, bayonet, possibly a fighting knife. The M3 fighting knife is fantastic. Yep. And then you would have had individual pouches, sorry folks, for your Garand. The M1 carbine would have had 2 pouches. The 1911 holster would have had a single pouch for it. BAR would have had its pouches. I think even guys that carried the Springfield, even guys that were designated marksman snipers, if you will, in the unit, would have had similar to a Garand belt, because instead of having 8 rounds of 30-aught, you would have had a 5-round stripper of 30-aught.
Everybody does the hobby for a reason. I do it to be an educator. So you want to do your research. You want to make sure you look good. Now, okay, so looking good may mean you look like crap, like physically, but it's right. It's accurate. Alright guys, I want to really thank y'all for watching. If you have any questions, please comment below. I'm going to keep doing videos. I'm going to do a nursing video. I want to do a Navy video for all you guys that want to do different styles of reenacting within World War II. Mr. Caleb here, check him out. His YouTube channel is The Traveling Bee. He's actually active duty United States Navy. Most of his videos, he just travels around Europe. You can catch him, just look him up, give him a like and subscribe. Thank y'all for watching. Hope this is useful. See ya.